SCP-6659. The distinct components of SCP-6659 are currently housed in Mobile Site 184-A, as detailed in the Site dossier. A high-security semi-submersible research vessel, Mobile Site 184-A, was constructed from the remains of SCP-D to benefit from its various technological capabilities and latent quasi-anomalous properties. It has largely functioned to facilitate covert research operations, often relating to one or more hostile groups of interest seeking to prevent or manipulate said research. Site 184-A's current default entering point is located kilometers of Sable Island, Nova Scotia. Any unidentified vessel entering within 10 kilometers of Site 184-A is to be redirected via cover S-55. In the event of a hostile party attempts to approach Site 184-A, the vessel must exercise its full submerged capabilities, descending to a depth of 150 meters for a period of up to 72 hours. Should any hostile party successfully board Site 184-A, its onboard scuttle system is to activate, thereby triggering a series of explosive charges positional on the vessel's length. A supermajority of crew members assigned to Site 184-A are aware of and have either explicitly or implicitly agreed to this emergency procedure. In the event that contact with Site 184-A is lost, its emergency beacon is initiated, or its scuttle system is activated. Foundation nautical forces stationed at Site 184-A are to undertake search and rescue, military intervention, and/or salvage operations as necessary. Assuming ideal detonation, SCP-D would remain unscathed for retrieval in the case of emergency procedure. Crew members assigned to Site 184-A but not actively involved in the maintenance and/or operation of SCP-6659 are forbidden from descending below Operational Deck 4, accepting approval from Captain S. Jones, as strictly necessary, or Drs. S. Milton or J. Blake. Each of SCP-6659's components are only to be activated whether simultaneously or in isolation, following verification of confirmed Overseer Council order, and must be jointly initiated by Drs. Milton and Blake. Following activation, assigned technicians must perform a complex examination and diagnosis of the associated digital, biomechanical, and noted systems composing SCP-6659. Addendum 1. Theological Context. A foundation for reciprocal worship, partial applications of human-to-deity relations on worship. God exists because we believe in them. Gods exist because we believe in them, and to make us believe in them. The very nature of our relationship with the divine is reciprocal. We create beings of parahuman ability, whom we then elevate beyond ourselves to imbue with significance. These beings, in turn, rely on this recognition to define the scope and breadth of their influence and existence. Fundamental to this dynamic is the act of worship, an expression of recognition that embodies the deity in the psychosphere. While gods are real, their existence is derived from and contained with the realm of human thought. The measurable manifestations in the physical world are restricted to the formation of totemic avatars. Despite its limitations, such conceptual entities are capable of enacting change in the physical world around us, and frequently do so to varying extents, performing miraculous acts, manifesting their presence through omens, and bestowing boons upon chosen acolytes. The extent and nature of these direct interactions are shaped by and reflect the worship of a deific entity received from human or non-human persons. The wills and capabilities of the deific entities are directly correlate to both the perception of such by humans, as well as their conceptual topography within the psychosphere. We created gods, and in doing so offered them the power and influence to shape their own image, and our perception of that image. Given this paradigm, the question emerges of how an organization such as a foundation ought to respond to threats posed by deific entities. Thus far, standard operating procedure advocates for preventive measures. Organized religion and acts of worship have frequently been nudged towards conceptualizations of gods as hands-off entities, whose involvement in day-to-day affairs is inconsequential, or a uniform background presence that stabilizes consensus reality. While this method has largely been successful in ensuring hostile deific entities do not gain significant traction in the mainstream culture and religious practices, current reactive measures to emergent threats are often inadequate. As directly combating the existence of a hostile god within the cytosphere is currently unfeasible, the Foundation's response to active Daphid threats prioritizes dismantling systems of worship in the physical world that define the support and the behavior of such an entity. However, the identification and neutralization of cult formations engaging in active worship of malicious or normalcy threatening Daphid entities have seen mixed results, with consequences ranging from high mortality rates of assigned operatives and numerous threats to the integrity of the Veil. The current method appears to be unsatiable. Daphid entities are not locked to the physical world, including their tortural groups that engage in their worships. Through their manifestations in the psychosphere, they can traverse along lines of conceptual relation, touching and influencing different peoples around the world, inspiring a new cult formations which themselves become and or splinter into divergent sects. SCP-6659 is a Foundation-designed Eidon weapon developed for the neutralization of hostile Daphid entities. This device is composed of 3 incorporated systems, which function to destabilize a given Daphid entity's embodied memeplex within the noosphere, preventing their conceptualization and consequently worship. These systems are SCP-6659-A, Trimestigious Engine Totemic Signifier, derived from SCP-6699's Elmwood's engine. SCP-6659-A is employed to map existing relational lines to conceive association between the physical object and applicable mathematic constructs. In its current use, a totem and an item conceptually associated with a specific Daphid entity is inserted into the device, which then identifies and traces the boundaries of the relevant Daphid entity within the noosphere. This enables the entity's mimetic construct to be conceptually identified as distinct from other noted quanta. SCP-6659-B, Godot Jerry Conceptual Applicator. Having identified and isolated the targeted Daphid entity within the noosphere via SCP-6659-A, SCP-6659-B applies a conceptual framework of universal acceleration to all individual data points forming the mimetic construct. As a result, the data composing the Daphid entity is accelerated to superconceptual velocities, whereby the individual components of the mimetic construct can only be conceived in relation to their relative accelerated movement. As a result, the lines of conceptual relations that form the construct weaken and subsequently dissolve, rendering the construct incapable of cohesively existing as an assemblage within the noosphere, and thus preventing any interactions between data points, both external and internal to the constructs. SCP-6659-C, Generation 7 Biomechanical Data Storage Vault composed of 25 vats containing biomechanical computational devices suspended in artificial cerebrospinal fluid. SCP-6659 is capable of storing and analyzing mimetic data of conceptually isolated and accelerated Daphid entities without engaging the reciprocal conceptual relations, i.e. worship. The computational systems of SCP-6659-C additionally monitor the ongoing process of SCP-6659-A and B, while simultaneously providing the Diginosphere interface for human users to examine and interpret relevant conceptual data. Addendum 2. Project Introduction. Project Datidium. While the initial proposal for this project focused more broadly on the creation of an anomaly employed by the Foundation for decommissioning of other anomalous phenomena, the subtext was clear. We require a means to combat gods. The Foundation, for all its grandiose notions and ideas, its flirtations with concepts beyond the veil of normalcy, remains an institution of bricks, mortar, bodies, and paper. Applied metaphysics does not reject this notion. We need to know what our limitations are, as it's the only way to push beyond them. SCP-6659 is a culmination of that drive to extend beyond the physical. While the noosphere permeates every aspect of our lives, what it means to think, what we can and cannot conceive of, our ability to alter what has been unrefined at best. When it comes to non-physical threats, the Foundation requires a new approach to accomplish its goal: the securing, containment, and protection of humanity, and resultantly normalcy at all costs. We've been dying aimlessly in the dark, hoping to pull it off. We needed to become the scalpel, capable of exercising specific dangers with negligible damage to those living in the light. That's where Datidium comes in. If these mimetic constructs are worshipped as deities, they each are only another anomaly to be understood and will be treated as such. Those who threaten the Foundation will be contained, their influence and danger mitigated, and the world will keep turning. Welcome to the team. We're glad to have you. We then did an excerpt from an introductory briefing to Project Datidium from Dr. John Blake, Department of Tactical Theology. My colleague has explained the importance of this project. I'm here to tell you not to be too hasty. The notion of worship is not exclusive to what we would typically consider deific entities. Our modern society elevates at nearly every facet of contemporary life beyond its inherent value and means. Democracy, family, capitalism, each of such concepts defines our relationship to the world. The concepts are in flux. They change and shift based on individual minds, informed by their beliefs over local collective consciousness, developing new forms of cultural shifts over time. What is the distinction between such a concept and deific entity? The difference we may point to is that these concepts are inert and useless inert unless acted upon, responsive to the human rather than engaged reciprocally. However, recent findings indicate that is a false assumption. We've begun to see that these concepts do respond. They influence us in ways that we do not fully yet understand. Perhaps it's an issue of malice. Does the conceptual entity wish us harm, change our understanding of the world? But even then, the distinction is murky. Does a new political theory, relationship to nature, or revolutionary technology not potentially straddle this divide? Have we not seen the world shift and change responsive to what were presumed to be non-anomalous processes and influences? The process of apotheosis, so prevalent in our shared myths, is ill understood at best. We claim to know what a god is, intrinsically, if not rationally, but are ignorant as to how exactly they are formed within our collective consciousness. Our foundation, a secret gathering of people working towards a common goal, elevating the notion of securing, containment, and protection, may not seem so dissimilar to the faith-driven groups we target. The project is necessary, yes, but it is a grave uncertainty. This is a new relationship between humans and the divine. The very relation itself is a concept which, if elevated via worship, could have grave implications on the structure of reciprocity and deification. We risk idolizing the destruction of our idols, and we do not know what ground we tread in doing so. We are then given an activation log of events using SCP-6659. Totemized object, SCP-055, the skull of the last monarch of the Homo sapiens invisibly. A human subspecies was coexisted with Homo sapiens until their latent anti-nomadic properties became evident, motivating their non-anomalous relatives to enact their genocide over the course of the 19th century. Worship group, Disciples of the Unseen. Successful identification and acceleration of a nomadic construct. Construct subsequently unidentified as acceleration begins to deviate chaotically, resulting in conceptual quanta ejected from the gnosis. While the results of activation 001 cannot be verified, it's currently hypothesized that the conceptual acceleration applied to the nomadic construct associated with SCP-055 resulted in a complete obliteration of its neospheric relations. As a result, 055 previously recorded information describing SCP-055 alongside any association it had to the genocide of the Homo sapiens invisibly are now impossible for human subjects to conceptualize. SCP-055 has been transferred to Standard Anomaly Chamber 055, Site 19 for containment. Efforts are underway to refine the selective application of conceptual acceleration to ensure the employee totems remain conceptual post-activation. Activation number 2. Totemized object, shriveled, mummified hand possessing atypical musculature structure. Worship group, followers of the Angel's Path. Results, successful identification and acceleration of a nomadic construct. Data from SCP-6659-C indicates that the complete destabilization of the target's nomadic construct. The deific entity was successfully decommissioned. Activation number 003. 2% milk, 1 carton, and a crucifix. Worship Group Disciples of St. Bernard and the Path of the Savior. Successful identification and acceleration of manic construct. Due to Worship Group's existence, extensive historic cultural footprint, the Foundation is currently engaged in an ongoing attempt to alter the mythology concerning St. Bernard to conflate with common Christian doctrine. This has included the canonization of St. Bernard as a Christian saint and the proliferation of artworks depicting the Tessio Bernardi that stylistically imitate medieval and Renaissance artists. We are then informed that 3 activations were skipped. Then we are now on activation number 007, Totemized Object, Sacrificial Dagger. Worship by the Children of the Scarlet Cane. Successful identification and acceleration of a manic construct. Due to high degree of thaumaturgical users in position of leadership within this worship group, various sects have continued to operate post-activation. However, surveillance indicates that anomalous phenomena associated with these individuals are founded upon other thaumaturgic systems and bear no relation to the accelerated deific entity. Totemized Object, Cervidae Stroll. Worship by the 9th Green Lodge. Results were inconclusive. Activation 182 manually aborted due to system failure. Following the activation, Dash A and B appeared to successfully isolate and accelerate the targeted deific entity. However, during SCP-6659-C's view of relevant manic data, a series of cascading errors led to catastrophic system failure. Subsequently, 6 of the vast component SCP-6659-C ruptured. A power surge emanating from Dash A caused electrical fire within the control room, and 2 technicians supervising SCP-6659-B spontaneously demanifested. One individual remanifested approximately 5 meters above sea level adjacent to M-Site 184-A. The other individual remains missing, presumed deceased. As a result of this event, henceforth incident Omega E5, I think that's what it says, the operation of SCP-6659 has been suspended. Repairs to various systems and investigation into the cause of the incident are underway. Addendum 4. Post-incident debriefing. The conference aboard M-Site 184-A was convened in the aftermath of Incident E5, brings together researchers and technicians responsible for maintaining and operating SCP-6659-A, B, and C. Dr. Sandra Milton opened the session by reviewing the status of ongoing repairs, particularly to Dash B, before turning the floor over to technician Rupert Sodai, who had discovered a concerning irregularity in data collected from Dash C. He explained that the anomaly did not occur during the chaos of the incident itself, when taint ruptures disrupted the system. Instead, it appeared in the monitoring data afterward, when Dash C was tracking the associated manic constructs that had been accelerated out of conceptual resistance. Normally, once SCP-6659 neutralized the construct, its fragment to the noosphere remained sterile, showing no further interaction. However, Sodai observed a brief period of renewed activity in the cluster corresponding to a deific entity that has already been successfully accelerated beyond conception. For about 6 hours, new associations unexpectedly formed within the cluster before the activity subsided and vanished without a trace, making the anomaly easy to overlook at first. This development alarmed everyone. Milton pressed Sodai to clarify whether the original procedure had failed, but he confirmed that acceleration itself was fully successful. However, the fact that these interactions had no business occurring at all disturbed him slightly. SCP-6659 should have rendered them impossible. Boyd suggested that the phenomena might be random, but Sodai countered that such spontaneous interactions were implausible within a network as structured as the noosphere. The only reasonable explanation seemed to be that some external factor had acted upon the isolated cluster, though Sodai admitted he was not qualified to determine whether such a thing was possible. The speculation led Clayton Milton into a sharp debate. Boyd pressed for tests to isolate new conceptual associations, insisting that the machine existed precisely to confront unknown threats like this. Milton, however, argued against further experiments. By definition, she noted the Foundation had no means of comprehending an influence outside the noosphere. Any attempts to investigate would require building brain computers more advanced than human cognition itself, a dangerous and perhaps futile pursuit. Their exchange grew heated and Blade pushed further, only for Milton to remind him that the incident had already cost a life. With one member of staff missing and likely unrecoverable, the conversation fell into a heavy silence. Milton then informed the group that O5 had already intervened. All testing with SCP-6659 was suspended indefinitely, and the Foundation would be circulating information on both the incident and SCP-6659 itself to specialists at other sites. Teams at M-Site 184-A would need to prepare their reports with wider scrutiny. In addition, Dr. Place H. MCD was being dispatched to assist with repairs that would likely have questions for Sonai regarding the irregularity in -C. A transcript closed Dr. Blake, leaving the room in visible frustration. A reminder the meeting dealt with practical matters. Repairs to the SCP-6659 systems and the assignment of liaison technicians to coordinate the external specialists. The underlying concern, however, was mostly unspoken. If such an external had interfered with the Neosphere, the Foundation was already facing a threat beyond the scope of SCP-6659 itself. Addendum 5. Ongoing emergent scenario. The first recovered transcript comes from Dr. Milton's headquarters shortly after the heated exchange in the earlier conference. Dr. Blake approached Milton to apologize for his outburst, admitting that he had let his frustration with personal feelings cloud his judgment. Milton was willing to meet him halfway, acknowledging that the stress of recent events had strained everyone's nerves. Their conversation quickly shifted to more personal territory when Blake revealed that he had once been a pastor. He explained how in those days he was convinced that he was meant to spread God's word. Though he was never fully invested in the rigid doctrine itself, only in the idea that some transcendent being existed. Ironically, his faith collapsed after joining the Foundation. Encountering deific entities firsthand, seeing them not as ineffable gods but as flawed, limited beings that could be cataloged, studied, and even neutralized, stripped away the sense of transcendence that was once sustained him. Milton reminded him that this was simply the nature of their work. Theology, in its truest sense, was not mysticism, but the study of how these beings intersected with human cognition. Blake seemed unconvinced, almost yearning for something greater. He hinted that what they had just witnessed in the data anomaly might be proof of something else entirely. Blake cut himself off, excusing his thoughts as stress before leaving. Milton suggested he consider transferring or taking time away. Blake dismissed the idea with grim humor, requesting a copy of the transcript before departing. A second transcript documents what happened next. Surveillance shows Blake entering SCP-6659-A's control room. He secured the door behind him, even wedging a chair into the locking mechanism to prevent interference. He then addressed the security feed directly, identifying himself as Reverend John Blake, co-lead of Project Datidium and representative of Tactical Theology. He announced his intention to use his own brain as a totem within SCP-6659. His plan, he said, was to scan the entirety of his consciousness in the hope of mapping the entity. He believed responsible for Incident E5. Blake speculated that such an act would reveal a deity embodying the concept of humanity itself, something beyond the Foundation's current grasp. He admitted that in order to do this, he had stolen Dr. Milton's activation key, and he stressed that he was acting independently, without authorization from the project. He then initiated the activation sequence, bypassing safety protocols, and inserted his head into the device's compartment. Alarms sounded as the activation was detected, and MTF units rushed to the breach control room. Where they were to cut through the reinforced door, Blake began convulsing within the machine. A strange clear liquid seeped from the compartment, a mixture layer identified as cerebrospinal fluid and salt water, recalling the same anomaly from E5. Blake's final words, partially coherent, described being seen by something seized and immobilized by a tumor of thought that wished to reveal itself to him. When the MTF finally forced entry, Blake's body was unresponsive. Emergency shutdowns were triggered, and his remains were taken for a medical examination. The autopsy revealed that severe and unnatural distortions across multiple lobes of the brain, consistent with anomalous manipulation. The third transcript, reconstructed from analytic analysis of Blake's altered brain, attempts to capture what he experienced with an SCP-6659 during its activation. He described being disembodied, immersed in a vast conceptual space resembling a Neosphere, an infinite darkness populated by drifting points of light, each one a unit of pure conceptual data. The scene resembled a living constellation of ideas, connected by shifting lines of patterns. Then came a frail whisper in the darkness calling to him. Against the warnings of the surrounding light, which beckoned to remain with them, Blake followed the call. He encountered a looming, incomprehensible presence, a tower of blackness surrounding infinite hands, each rashly manipulated into more, an impossible structure embodying the divine will. From it emerged an enormous eye that tore open the sky, collapsing geometric impossibilities into itself and overwhelming Blake's perception. The voice told him that no god he had ever conceived could compare to this one. Overcome, he felt his thoughts consumed, his body transfigured into something alien, his hands streaming, his humanity dissolving. Until he submitted entirely. His final thoughts captured the paradox of the presence. God was horrifying, beautiful, cancerous, a tumor of divinity. There was nothing else. Following these events, Dr. Milton was placed under confinement for investigation, largely due to Blake's use of her stolen key. Leadership of the project was formally reassigned to Director Place HMCD, pending a full inquiry. Whatever Blake had encountered, whether an external influence, fracture within the noosphere, something entirely outside the Foundation's conceptual frameworks, the event left both the project and its personnel under intense scrutiny. Addendum 6, Project Update. Project Prometheum. The best kind of thought is forethought, whom the first humans knew as Prometheus. Seems a tad ironic to me, considering, he got himself tortured for eternity. We then did an extract from Dr. Place HMCD, PhD, Project Lead, Esoteric Polymath extract from Classified Project Update. Allow me to bring you up to speed. The noosphere can be thought as of the set of all ideas humans are capable of conceptualizing. It can also be thought as a collective consciousness. However, much more literally is the aggregate of informational structures contained within all human brains, i.e., the sum total of exactly all conscious and subconscious thoughts humans are having at any given instant. Recent studies go so far as to suggest that every bit of noetic information within human thought space corresponds directly to a unique neuron, or a category thereof, in some number of human brains. This has serious implications upon the consequences of Project Dahidium and SCP-6659. Consider what the machine does. By mapping a collection of concepts associated with an idealized, personified ideal, it alters said concepts such that connections between them cannot form within the noosphere. The individual conceptual elements can be slowly comprehended, but the idea construct of targeted deity is no longer perceptible. If we are to understand that these conceptual elements map to physical segments of the human brain, much more is being severed than just deific relations. 6 months after Incident E5-B, various forms of mental degradation have been observed in minor fractions of the population, including increased rates of early onset dementia, aphasia, and dysphagia, and acute paralysis. Various disinformation campaigns have been enacted to hide such. The likelihood of such developments appears to be vastly more common in individuals whose primary entities of worship were those decommissioned by SCP-6659. Eventually, the complex nature of conceptual association is not, and likely functionally cannot be, understood by humans. What's more troubling is the extra-noosphere entity Dr. Blake gave his life to discover. His final actions represent an unprecedented leap in faith in the direction of an entity beyond conception, one we should hardly be able to cogitate. Dr. Blake's faith was shattered by SCP-6659, resulting in a vacuum of worship. Yet the brain is an adaptive instrument, and his began searching for bigger and more powerful ideas. And the idea to notice. We have forced human cognition to expand deeper, uncharted waters, and we are unprepared for the horrors which lay there. Operational procedures. The goal of Project Prometheum is to combat extra-noosphere threats via channeled worship of the ideal of humanity, as achieved through the following vectors. Phase Alpha. Project Prometheum itself is to be extrapolated from humanity, and normalcy assigned details personified as Titan-class Olympian entity 014, Prometheus. This deity's identity as progenitor and the assistant of human civilization and development, punished unfairly by its brethren, is to be propagated as a manic construct by all possible non-disruptive vectors, including manipulation of education systems, entertainment industries, and religious groups of interest, anomalous or otherwise. Phase Beta. Extra-neospheric constructs are to be generally ignored by as many personnel as possible while maintaining efficacy in Project Prometheus operations. Following its manufactured re-apotheosis, Prometheus is to be elevated to the highest feasible level of worship, allowing highly beneficial reciprocal worship in humanity due to the core tenets of conceptual makeup. Phase Gamma. Through systematized large-scale prayer by Foundation personnel, Promethean analysis is to locate potential hostile extra-noospheric entities and isolate their constituent quanta into human-safe fragments. These fragments themselves must be targeted in tandem by Prometheus and SCP-6659, taking extreme care to re-render them dormant as they were prior to extra-noospheric influence. Phase Delta. Dormant components of human thought space are to be restructured into either the Prometheus mainplex or another humanity, a normal CLI IDI construct deemed symbiotic with it. The noosphere's gaps are to be filled and fortified such that it possesses the necessary cognitive defenses to handle a higher order concepts. Status Report. A composite of selectively human-safe fragments of the extra-noospheric entity initially encountered by Dr. Blake has been located, and rendered into the following highly anti-iconographic depiction. The following IDI complexes have been targeted: quinary mathematical operations, primordial ideals of rage and violence, the procession of many disparate points as composing some larger shape, i.e. constellation, the arbitration of optimistic ideals into unreasoned and indefensible motivations, i.e. defeatism, and the exhilaration of severing a finger from a squirming human hand, i.e. transcendence.